Iron Man 3 could easily be the last Iron Man film. Not that I'd want it to be, but it did close up the themes of the first two Iron Man films rather nicely. The Iron Man trilogy and the Dark Knight trilogy share many common themes that I'd like to take a closer look at. I won't be going to how the films Iron Man 3 and The Dark Knight Rises was similar. IGN already has a great look at that. But rather I'd like to talk about how the themes involved with the Dark Knight trilogy are the same as the Iron Man trilogy. And let's try to avoid the one is better than the other arguments, seeing as the only way you could be right with that argument is if you were God himself and explicitly stated as much. Everything else is opinion, since the world is lived subjectively. The Dark Knight trilogy had many themes throughout: legacy, identity, escalation, chaos versus order, and redemption. I figured that I don't have to go too much into the detail as to how these themes played out in the Dark Knight trilogy, unless you guys request a video in which I do as much, because I know I should probably be doing more responsible things with my time, like trying to cure world diseases with a sound vibration machine, but whatever, right? Instead, I will jump right into the three biggest common themes: redemption, legacy, identity, and escalation. Although all three Iron Man films feature these four themes throughout, if we were to pick one major theme for each movie, it'd break down like this: Iron Man 1, redemption; Iron Man 2, legacy; Iron Man 3, identity. Now let's go through and look at the films through the lens of these themes, as opposed to 3D glasses. In Iron Man 1, Tony begins a journey of redemption as he begins to destroy the weapons his company created, which has been delivered to the Ten Rings terrorist group. In the film, Tony builds bigger and better weapons for the defense contract his company has with the US military. Just like his father before him, Tony continues the work of being a weapons developer, which brings in the theme of legacy. Jericho is one of those bigger and better weapons, whose presence and creation introduces the escalation theme. Tony, after building a better electromagnet for his heart, called the arc reactor, begins creating the first Iron Man armor. As the movie progresses, Tony begins creating more impressive armors and weapons that continue to feed the theme of escalation. Tony even creates a second arc reactor in the film. Ironmonger himself is a villain of escalation, as the Ironmonger is a more impressive version of the Mark I Iron Man armor that Tony built. And in defeating Ironmonger, Tony redeems himself once more, as Ironmonger not only used Tony's Mark I as its base design, but it also used Tony's second arc reactor. Tony defeated the evils he unintentionally created. Similar to how I need to defeat the fires I unintentionally create while trying to make dinner. The theme of identity also begins to reveal itself in the first film. Tony starts off as a simple, yet intelligent, playboy, but throughout the film he begins to care about the damage he's caused through his weapons. His identity changes into the hero he becomes at the end of the film. There is also the issue of Iron Man or Tony Stark that's introduced at the end of the film. Before Tony goes out to the press to feed them a lie to protect Tony's identity, given to him by S.H.I.E.L.D., Tony states that he is Iron Man to Pepper, who responds, "You're not Iron Man, the suit is Iron Man." At the end, Tony tells the crowd, "I am Iron Man," which restates his belief. This quote is also the last thing said at the end of Iron Man 3, which gives the whole trilogy a nice wrap-up. Iron Man 2 begins with a theme of legacy, as both Tony and Vanko have a legacy to live up to. Tony and Vanko's fathers created the designs for the arc reactor, which is protecting Tony's heart. The arc reactor itself is an element of legacy, as it is created and used by both sons of the original designers. The theme of legacy continues not only with the whole Stark Expo, but also with Tony appointing Pepper as his successor of Stark Industries, after realizing he might be dying. We again see the theme of legacy as Fury tells Tony about his father's own shield, and as Tony uses his father's recorded message for him to find a way to fix himself up. If only I was given a long-lost message that would solve all of my health issues through Da Vinci Code-like clues. In the government hearing scene, we see just how far the escalation grows, as other companies are trying to reproduce and surpass Tony's tech. Tony then mentions that he is the new nuclear deterrent. Then, later in the film, Vanko uses his arc reactor to power his whips to attack Tony and make him bleed, so the people would no longer believe in him. Whiplash is the first successful form of escalation, seeing as Vanko didn't have to steal plans or Tony's reactor to make his suit, which was able to give Iron Man a run for his money. Justin Hammer then uses Vanko to escalate and upstage Tony's armor, successfully this time with a new whiplash and working drones. Justin Hammer also improves the Mark II armor, making it War Machine, which is another form of escalation, both technological and as an arms race between the US government and Tony Stark. The government basically says, and using Justin Hammer to help, if we can't have Iron Man, we'll have something bigger and better that can defeat Iron Man. Tony's identity in the film sort of regresses back to his pre-Iron Man days after he learns that he is slowly being poisoned by the very thing saving his life, the arc reactor. He even goes as far as to get drunk in the Iron Man armor and fight Rhodey. A drunk superhero? Where have I seen that before? Oh yes, I remember. At the end of the film, Tony is told by Nick Fury that Iron Man can be an Avenger, but Tony can't. This again raises the question that the end of Iron Man 1 put before us. Is Tony Iron Man, or is the suit Iron Man? The theme of identity doesn't only apply to Tony in this film though. Black Widow pretends to be someone else, Vanko's death is faked, and dead Vanko is really someone else. Rhodey becomes the identity War Machine, and Pepper Potts embraces her identity as CEO of Stark Industries. Redemption also returns in Iron Man 2 as Tony tries to redeem himself to Pepper and Happy after his big mess up, and eventually does after saving everyone at the Stark Expo. Howard Stark also redeems himself with that "You were my greatest creation" video Fury gave to Tony after we, the audience, discovered that Howard was not the greatest dad around. Where Iron Man 1 begins the journey of redemption, Iron Man 3 ends the journey of redemption. Pre-Iron Man Tony Stark is once again seen creating demons for himself, and this time in the form of AIM's founder, Aldrich Killian, and Extreme's co-creator, Dr. Maya Hansen. Tony also finds himself having to redeem himself after spending less time with Pepper, and putting her in danger through his careless provoking of the Mandarin. At the end of the film, Tony successfully redeems himself through defeating Killian and destroying his armored suits, the very ones that took all his time away from Pepper, in a display for her. Dr. Maya Hansen also redeems herself after talking to the captured Tony by trying to convince Killian to let Tony go. But then, she dies. Through Tony's post-traumatic stress disorder, after the events of the Avengers, Tony begins to create more and more Iron Man armors, which are his form of an arms race. He is escalating to be able to defeat any future threats similar to the aliens in the Avengers, which up the ante in terms of firepower. When Tony calls his suits to help at the end of the film, a throwback to Iron Man 2 and Iron Vanko's drone approach escalation, Tony is trying to escalate in terms of firepower and soldiers to defeat his enemy, AIM. Extremis is also a form of escalation. It's a form of biotechnological escalation. Killian is trying to create the transhuman, which is a human whose limits are removed and whose abilities are enhanced through emerging technologies. Extremis can even be seen as human escalation. Iron Man 3 poses a solution. If advanced aliens can be enhanced through their magic technology, we can be advanced through our science technology to catch up or surpass them. The problem is that the obsession of making this transhuman has caused the downfall of the brilliant Dr. Maya Hansen and Aldrich Killian. And if Tony continues with his obsession of building better Iron Man armors, and even beginning to make himself a transhuman by being able to control the armors through implants, he can end up the same way, as evidenced when his suit almost kills Pepper while Tony is sleeping, which would be quite a way to die and hard to explain to the police. It was an accident. My suit strangled her to death because I dreamed of creepy things. Sure. Sounds more like a kinky night gone wrong. Speaking of kinky, we get our first glimpse of the main theme of identity when Tony leaves a card with Dr. Maya Hansen after sleeping with her. You know who I am. Happy's new position at Stark Industries also plays with identity, as Happy is now being overprotective and embracing this new identity of security head. When Happy is hurt after a bombing, the press asks Tony to say something about Happy's current condition at the hands of the Mandarin, and Tony threatens the Mandarin and tells him to find him. Tony then destroys the cell phone of a man filming it and asks him if that's what he wanted to hear. Tony knows how the people perceive him. Tony recognizes the identity he now holds in the public eye after the previous films, and it's that of a hero. When the child Tony meets in Tennessee, Harley asks him who he is. Tony responds, "A mechanic." This is how Tony sees himself in simplest terms, and it's this identity as a mechanic that Tony uses to fight his way into the Mandarin's headquarters with improvised gadgets and weapons. At the end of the film, Tony discovers that he indeed is Iron Man, as he said at the end of Iron Man 1 to Pepper and the press. The suit was just a shell for the man inside, and the arc reactor in his chest was just his way of holding onto the time he spent creating the Iron Man identity. He no longer needed it to prove to himself that he is Iron Man. Tony Stark is not Tony Stark, not since his brush with death at the hands of the Ten Rings in Iron Man 1. Tony Stark is Iron Man, the hero, the inventor, the mechanic. Just like Bruce Wayne is Batman, Tony Stark is Iron Man. Anyone can wear a Batman suit, but that doesn't make them Batman. Just as anyone can wear an Iron Man suit, but that doesn't make them Iron Man. Rhodey gained his own identity as War Machine and did not become a second Iron Man. In the comics, Rhodey took Iron Man's place for a while, similar to Dick Grayson taking over for Batman, before gaining his own identity, seeing as no one can replace Iron Man or Batman, but they can be inspired by them. Rhodey also plays with the identity theme, as Rhodey is rebranded by the military as Iron Patriot. It is the military's way of promoting American pride in the face of terrorism, the crime without a face, and in the face of public scrutiny of their weapons. Rhodey, though, prefers War Machine, as his password and username clearly show. His identity is War Machine, and he cannot change who he is for the government or anyone else. The fact that the identity of Iron Patriot is hijacked to kill the president shows that the identity of Iron Patriot never was Rhodey's in the first place. Iron Patriot is just a puppet, first of the government's PR, and second for Killian's scheme. The Mandarin is another play in identity, with the Mandarin being a puppet for the people of the world to fear, similar to how the Iron Patriot was a puppet for the people of the US to believe in, and how Tony is perceived as a hero by the public. It's all perception of identity. Rhodey even tells Tony at the beginning of the film, when Tony has an anxiety attack, how, "This doesn't look good, Tony." The Mandarin that is being perceived by the public is just an actor playing an identity for money and girls. The true identity of the Mandarin is revealed to be Killian at the end of the film when he states, "I am the Mandarin," similar to how Tony states, "I am Iron Man." The Mandarin also plays into the theme of legacy, as Killian sets up the Mandarin as the head of the Ten Rings from the first film. It's unclear if the Ten Rings even have a true leader, but Killian sets up this identity so they can put a face to the faceless terrorist group. In doing so, the Mandarin continues and simultaneously creates a legacy for the Ten Rings. Iron Man 3 also ends Tony's theme of legacy quite nicely. And meeting Tony Stark's Robin character, Harley, Tony gets to play the part of a father figure. Tony's father was not a great dad to him, often ignoring him and keeping himself busy. But Tony has the ability now to be a good father figure to someone else. And like his father, Tony works together and bonds with Harley over engineering work. The difference, though, is that Tony doesn't ignore Harley when he doesn't need him anymore. Tony even updates all of Harley's equipment at the end of the film. In fact, Tony giving Harley all of that updated equipment neatly ties up all of the themes in one element. In Harley, Tony has, for the first time, created an angel as opposed to a demon he must one day redeem himself for creating. In doing so, Tony has once again redeemed himself. Tony also leaves with Harley a legacy to be like him, to be like Iron Man, not to be Iron Man, but to one day be inspired by him and make his own identity, much like Robin Blake in The Dark Knight Rises, which plays with the identity theme. And last, but not least, we have escalation, as Harley is presented with a potato gun 2.0. All the themes neatly wrapped up with Harley by Tony. As you can see, the Iron Man trilogy and the Dark Knight trilogy share many themes, and both are greater films as a trilogy because of those interconnecting themes.